Now, I had a great night on Friday night celebrating the incredible work that has been done by the former Prime Minister of Australia, Tony Abbott, in a book that he is about to release. In fact, it is available tomorrow. It's called Australia, a History, and what is a 3-part documentary. Now, Sky News has never done something as ambitious, as big, and in my view, impressive. One of those bits of television that will last well beyond many news cycles and will be around for many, many years. It was an honour to be there. It was a pretty special occasion. And Tony Abbott has put together a book, as I say, about it. And the actual documentary is going to be not one, but 3 nights in a row. The book, which is out tomorrow, please buy it tomorrow. Don't muck around. Australia, a History. It'll be available tomorrow, coinciding with the premiere of the 3-part documentary. Tomorrow, Tuesday and Wednesday, 7:30 p.m, Australian Eastern Daylight Time, here on Sky News. It was a great night on Friday night. I've had a chance to see a bit of the documentary, read a bit of the book. I will do so more across the week. But I tell you, buy the book tomorrow. Buy it for somebody who cares about our country for Christmas, and watch the documentary tomorrow night here, Sky News at 7:30. Looking forward to that over the next 3 days. Now, from somebody who celebrates Australia to somebody who seemingly does not like much about modern Australia because she believes we've never dealt with the original sin. That is, of course, the matters of modern Australia. And while we are looking forward to, by this time tomorrow night, Hamas releasing all of the living and the dead hostages that remain, and celebrations to that effect ahead of that moment, which will play out in the next 24 hours, live on your screen. It's about, midday currently in Israel right now. The expectation is that by tomorrow morning their time, which again will be sort of mid-morning for us, the first of the hostages will be released. Again, if things go to their traditional timings, that may well fall right into prime time as well. But an incredible moment is ahead, thanks to the work of Donald J. Trump being able to broker that ceasefire arrangement, no more bombs falling on Gaza, incredible pictures of people returning to their homes after the 2 years of war. And again, peace to the people of Israel who have long been afraid of what had happened to those who were still alive and those who wanted to get the remains of those that had been taken more than 2 years ago on October the 7th. Now, despite the fact that the bombs have stopped falling and there are going to be the hostages that are sent home, we still had protests today. I'm not entirely sure about what. Now, yes, there are long-standing issues of which many people say, well, that's the reason to keep going. Well, no, the justification for the day in, day out has been the dropping of bombs. Well, that's all stopped. So why did people take to the streets today? Well, apart from perhaps habit for some. But as always, if Lydia Thorpe is at a protest, she has to make it about her. And yes, I have to say it was very much about her today. Now, for some reason, people have decided to mash together the issues around Palestine and Indigenous peoples in this country. And Lydia Thorpe, as you will have heard by now, made an extraordinary comment that I don't understand how there is not some sort of legal consequence to this. And even if she is, if she is speaking in hyperbole, but if any other person had said what she had said, you'd be getting a phone call from the federal police when you make threats like this. Let's see what happens to Lydia Thorpe.
And we will fight every day, and we will turn up every day. And if I have to burn down Parliament House to make a point, I am not there to make friends. I am there to get justice for our people.
It is honestly extraordinary. Let's see what happens in the next set of 7. Her political nemesis is somebody who has never been more popular in terms of a nationwide appeal. Pauline Hanson, in not one but 2 opinion polls, including one which has just dropped in the past couple of hours, is now in a position where One Nation nationally is more popular than the Greens. Now think about it. The Greens sitting at about 11%, they're able to get 1, 2, 3 senators elected at each and every cycle. If this keeps up, One Nation will be adding 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 at each and every cycle, and they will become an absolute dominant force when it comes to the crossbench of Australian politics. Now, we all know why this is happening. We all know that it is perhaps hardcore, more conservative coalition supporters that have decided to go somewhere else. But as we've been in a long conversation about One Nation for as long as we have had access to a microphone and a television camera, put simply, people seem to vote a little more ideologically in the Senate. So if you are somebody of the hard left, you're going to vote Greens as the insurance policy against what Labor does should they form government in the lower house. And I have long said that there is a vote that is waiting to do the same in the Senate. And we've seen lots of people come and go, but the one who has stood out the brightest, the boldest and the longest is Pauline Hanson and is One Nation. This is not just a Queensland phenomenon, and it is not just a falling over the line phenomenon. Remember, at the last election, they got senators elected in Queensland, New South Wales and Western Australia, none of whom were named Pauline Hanson. Now, Malcolm Roberts did an incredible job of being able to build it all with social media, but very obviously there is a very significant number of Australians who want to take out insurance against whatever government happens downstairs, either a more pure form of opposition to a Labor government or a handbrake from some of the more lefty madness at times that can take over the Liberal Party. Well, again, the Labor Party, together with the Greens, they remain in a position where the two-party preferred is embarrassing to talk about in terms of the contest, but we are, of course, at the reset. We're still, almost 3 years away from an election. But the idea there that in the Resolve poll, which came out this evening in the Channel 9 newspapers, that One Nation outpolls the Greens by a full point is a seismic change. Now, with the Resolve poll, they also asked people for a comment about why they are choosing to place their vote where they're placing. Some of the negative comments about the government read as follows. The Labor Party's done a hopeless job. The cost of living has risen so much under them. Somebody's just voting for a change, really. The economy is bad. Living standards are falling. AI will take jobs. The current government's direction makes me feel a bit unsafe. Because I feel Labor doesn't care about the working class anymore, they decided to move their vote wherever they have moved their vote. Again, to the left perhaps with the Greens, but more likely to places like One Nation, which are now more popular than the Greens. Hallelujah. The federal government have really failed people on the promises that they made previously. I mentioned there was another poll. In the Australian Financial Review, they've ditched the people who got it wrong and they've got the people now who get it oh so right, and that is the Redbridge organisation and our mate Kos Samaras. We'll have a chat to Kos on the show tomorrow because there's a lot more detail apart from the headlines, but the headlines read as follows. One Nation surges as the Liberals squabble over immigration. Have a look here. Now, it was a 1 point gap in the Channel 9 poll. In this poll, they are now sitting at 14% to the Greens 11%, and the Teal Independent Other is sitting at 12%. So they are now running third. They're on the podium. Now, as you can see, two-party preferred, because the Greens and most of the Teals add up with Labor, they end up in a, again, disgraceful position for those of us who don't want to see this government get stronger by the day at 54-46. But this thing matters. And also, as you know, the reality of the Australian electorate, if you had a look at the electoral roll, and just because the electoral roll tells us a story does not mean, of course, that everyone goes one way and everyone goes another, but the reality is that you can sort of split the country up and down when it comes to gender, and you can start to slice it when it comes to age. Remember, there are more female voters and there are now more people under the age of 50, and according to many of these polls, that means you end up in the scenario where the left is currently leading. In fact, because, again, who we will talk to tomorrow night, just follow here, because I'm going to do this in two ways. One, I want you to look on the right-hand side, okay? Two-party preferred, currently 54-46. With young people, it is 69-31 in favour of the Labor Party. For millennials, it's 52-48. And then, my group, Gen X, it's very close, 51-49. And then, when you go to baby boomers and higher, anyone over the age of, say, 55, it's 55-45. You can see there, when you look over, have a look for your generation, and you can start to see that that number, by the way, of One Nation, it's not just 55 plus. It's not just people over, say, 45, but we're now into a scenario where an awful lot of people over the age of 35 are also sitting in that One Nation column. So there is a lot to talk to our panel tonight, which of course includes the wonderful Lee Hanson, who is part of this revolution that is happening before our eyes. A fascinating conversation that we will have with her and Daniel Wild, and a later unpacking of things tomorrow night with Kos Samaras. So, as always, if you care about the detail, if you want to know how the country's actually going as opposed to what we hope it to be, A little temperature check. Cosamaris tomorrow night on the show. Speaking of, none other than Matt Canavan. We love Matt Canavan, and he will be absolutely tickle pink at the moment. And Chris Bowen may be slightly concerned, although obviously one is in power, one is not. And when it comes to matters of net zero, this is fascinating. Now, we keep being told that Australia doesn't want to do anything about moving away from net zero by 2050. Well, have a look at this. 37% of people agree or strongly agree that the federal coalition should abandon its net zero position. Basically, the same number there in terms of those who disagree or strongly disagree, and then the number that really matters is the grey one on the far end. A quarter of voters have now moved into not sure. So does this mean that the Labor Party doubles down? If you don't believe in net zero, then you don't believe in climate change and you don't believe in modern Australia? Or those who have argued that the coalition can win an argument because there is a significant number of people that are still up in the air. Again, we'll talk to Matt Canavan about that most likely tomorrow. But there is a lot to get to in all of these numbers. Fascinating to see. All right, a couple of other issues. As you know on the show, we do not shy away from the subject of big Australia. Why? Because Australia, which had 18 million people in it 30 years ago, has now got 28 million people in it now, and it will be on its way to 40 million plus in 30 years from now. Now, people like Andrew Hastie have made it very clear that this is one of those issues they desperately want to talk about. I have criticised when he starts to move into the lane of the strangers in our own country argument, because the reality is that in many electorates, particularly the ones in Sydney and Melbourne, more than half of the people who vote in elections have a parent born overseas. Now, whether that's in the UK or whether it's from India or China, it all changes where you go. That's why, in my case, in my belief, you don't focus in on the identity part of it. You talk about it in terms of numbers, in terms of infrastructure, in terms of issues that are less offensive but just as impactful, which is why the coalition, and remember, Andrew Hastie walked away from the front bench because he, despite the fact that he was the Home Affairs Minister, which is the more senior spokesperson position to the immigration position, he wasn't going to be given the ability to shape the immigration policy. So the person who would, under the current regime inside the Liberal Party, it'll be a bloke called Paul Scar, a senator. Quote, our immigration policy must be in our national interest, but more than that, the debate in relation to immigration policy must be conducted in a way which is also in our national interest. So a bit of a bit each way, but you get where they're starting to go. The debate with respect to Australia's immigration policy must be had. It's an important debate, but it must not seek to inflame emotion, but rather engage in good faith with respect to the issues that need to be debated in our national interest. It is in our common interest. I agree completely with all of that. I think you can be a little more specific about the fact that, 800 people are lining up to apply for one rental property in the eastern suburbs of Sydney. 150 people are lining up for rental properties in regional Queensland. There are not enough homes. Yet hundreds of thousands, becomes 500,000, becomes 1 million, becomes 2 million by the end of this government. And does anyone think that our current resourcing is good enough for 2025 numbers, let alone 2027, 2029 and 2040? No. And then we get to those that are the political opportunists. There is a disgraceful move on by left-wing members of a local council in Sydney who are still trying to keep alive Jacinta Price and trying to whip up fear in the Indian community. Now, this is ridiculous. In the same way that local councils want to have their say on the Middle East or want to declare a climate emergency, could somebody please tell Parramatta Council to pull their head in here? Because this is their plan. Parramatta Council, one of Sydney's most populated and multicultural communities, will debate a motion on Monday that calls for the Northern Territory Senator to publicly apologise for questioning the voting patterns of Indian migrants. I mean, that's ridiculous. Why would a local council have any power over a federal politician, let alone skew, and I mean skew, the comments that, remember, if anyone had actually paid attention to the actual words, but remember, we're sort of playing a whispers game here, where you just shave off the edges, and just people start remembering the caricature of the comments. There's a bit more from skynews.com.au here to see. Councillors have received numerous messages from the community expressing their disappointment that political leaders would make irresponsible statements that undermine community harmony. The motion reads, well, you should have told people, thank you so much for your feedback, but we're in charge of the roads, the rates, the rubbish and the public library. It is not our job to police what is being said or not said by federal politicians. Yet this will be a vote tomorrow. And if passed, the council motion would officially label Ms Price's comments as divisive and harmful to community harmony. What garbage. They would demand the senator make a public apology. Of course, they have no power, they cannot enforce it, but will they grandstand? Pay attention to the political affiliations of the people whom will supposedly be speaking on behalf of the community of Parramatta. I again say to the people who represent the people in the city of Parramatta, which is a thriving metropolis, I do love when inner Westie journalists in Sydney have just discovered the second CBD of Sydney, as it has been for more than 30 years. But okay, welcome to the party. I'm glad you made it over the Gladesville Bridge. I'm sure you had to, pay for per diems because it was such a far trip from the office. But Parramatta is a thriving place. We showed it in our show from Western Sydney just a couple of weeks ago in our town. Focus on the roads, the rates, the rubbish, the library. The idea, and perhaps maybe knock off a few of these one-way streets and you can't turn left and you can't turn right. It's very specific, and I know we're a national show, but that's their focus, not this crap. But watch the media follow this crap more than anything else they've done in the past few years. If you're a Qantas customer, you are one of many who may be quite concerned tonight because data breaches are again back in the news, and this time because the company has refused to pay the ransom. We now have personal data of 5 million Qantas customers has been released onto the dark web. Let us see, by the way, if the federal politicians who tried to make all of the hay out of Optus decide to go as hard after Qantas. Or, of course, do they get nervous about the Chairman's Club status, which means we're not going to hear a lot of bashing up of Qantas and how it has been holding on to data. Now, of course, they are the victims of a criminal act. But let's wait and see. Will the finger pointing and mental finger painting, there you go, of some of the politicians about Optus extend to Qantas? Or does it affect their status? No. Here's part of an explainer from Channel 9 about exactly what has made it onto the darkest parts of the web.
It was a deadline set by the hackers yesterday afternoon Australian time, and with no ransom paid, Qantas customers have had their personal data released. Qantas was among a number of companies attacked, all customers of global technology giant Salesforce, with hackers gaining access to an airline call centre by impersonating legitimate employees. The leaked details include dates of birth, phone numbers, addresses, emails and frequent flyer numbers, but Qantas says no credit card details, personal financial information or passport details were stolen and no frequent flyer accounts were compromised. Cyber experts say this information alone isn't of major concern, but warn it can be used with other personal data already out in the open.
Now, as you know, we play politics hard here. Why? Because it's about the future of the country. You also know how strong a critic I have been of this government. But if you're sitting down, I'm about to say something nice about them. Federal Parliament last week debated legislation which is a good idea. Now, people whose babies don't make it all the way through, and things like stillbirth, that means you still have to give birth to a baby that may well have already passed, or a baby that passes during the process of childbirth, well, all sides of politics have got together and they are going to approve parental leave, the same amount of time that you would be spending normally with a baby, as part of the beginnings. There's never a healing process, but the beginnings of the coping process when the worst possible thing takes place. Now, you know why I care about this, but you also know that you may know somebody in your world, and it may well even have been you many years ago, or maybe you might be watching us right now after coming home and visiting family in hospital. This is a good idea. It's a good idea. It's a decent idea. I know there are some conversations on the very edge of this that have tried to pull this into the abortion conversation. Well, it's not about that. It is about stillbirth. It is about people who lose their babies. And, well, of course, believe me, it is, again, a process that you never heal from. But, again, finding your sea legs to be able to begin to cope and to get the support, the idea that you will be able to have the same paternal and same maternal leave, it's a good idea. So thank you to everyone who supported it, the idea, pushed it through Parliament. This was a good idea. again, strength and love to everyone who deals with it, either very fresh or very much in the past. It hurts, and it hurts forever. Now, as you know, we care a lot about how older Australians are dealt with and sometimes poorly dealt with by our country. And there's been a story which has been floating around for a couple of weeks, and I wanted to take some time to talk about it here on Sunday night. The Older Persons Advocacy Network has done a great job in putting together some data that has gone into a story to talk about the number of people who should be in aged care, but aren't in aged care for a whole collection of different reasons, but they are just being left in hospitals. Now, this, of course, has the flow-on effect about hospital beds that are unable to be offered to people who will be coming in and out faster. But can I read a little bit from this story because it is really important? Again, you're not going to see this stuff on the 6 p.m. news. You're not going to see most people leading their shows with it for obvious reasons, but it's important. And again, it's just a way of you knowing that we see you on this side of the camera, okay? Elderly people are being put up in hotels by overburdened hospitals and are being chased by debt collectors, and alarming signs that the aged care system, again, is in crisis. Remember, we've had a Royal Commission. How many reports do we need to know? But yet again, the same stuff happens. Yet a concerning new trend, residential facilities, which in some parts of the country are nearly at capacity, they've begun screening potential new residents and rejecting those deemed more difficult, including mental illness. But what about this one? Imagine knocking somebody back because of dementia, let alone somebody who is obese, overweight, or somebody who smokes, neither of which are illegal. All because they're in the too hard basket. Literally human beings being put into the too hard basket by some parts of the aged care system. It's a disgrace. Meanwhile, delays in providing home care packages, meaning if any of those people are able to stay in their home for as long as possible, they're not getting the chance to do it. Why? Because there are not enough packages which are being approved. It means thousands of older people are ending up in hospitals in crisis situations, but then can't be discharged because no aged care bed or support is in place in their home. Would it surprise you that the person who had responsibility of this area for the past 3 years would be the same prima donna that was running around trying to pretend nothing to see here, I'm the new minister when it comes to Optus? The one who's got so many tickets on herself because of her job as the Communications and Sports Minister. So many freebies, she's now got tickets on herself. Oh, she was a hard worker, this one. In between football games, in between the Melbourne Cup. But of course, to discuss any of that somehow is sexist. I'm waiting for that response in the next little while. This used to be her job. On her watch, it's got worse, not better. And I don't care what anyone who supports her or politics of her decision-making tells me in reverse. And speaking of, remember when you were told during the federal election there was going to be multiple interest rate cuts? In fact, this mattered a lot because remember, prior to the February interest rate cut, the Liberal Party was leading. They were leading sort of 52-48, 51-49. They certainly were in front. And then the first of the interest rate cuts happened, and guess what happened? It flipped the other way to being 49-51, and then it became 48-52. So when Jim Chalmers said this, it moved a few more people into the Labor column for their near-record win.
Markets are now expecting around 4 interest rate cuts in Australia this calendar year.
Yeah, not going to happen. In fact, the major banks have now turned around and after seeing inflation go back up, after seeing concerns like the amount of people who have used the most of that 5% deposit scheme, which I don't particularly hate, but it means more people, higher prices. The ANZ Bank has become the latest major bank to push its forecast for the next cash rate cut to February 2026, not Melbourne Cup Day, but February 2026. It follows similar revisions of the Commonwealth Bank and National Australia Bank, both who expect just a single cut, no more, just one, early next year. So the Treasurer said 4, maybe 5, reality nowhere near it. In the meantime, surprise, surprise, you keep paying.